your word? What's your word?
You know, there's an old saying, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, I am. I think it's biblical. I don't know who came up with it. I think I saw it on like New Jack City or something like that. It was a very cool movie thing to say. And it's apropos, poetic, as it were, that we would be using this as the discussion this week. This is the Bees of Boxing. I am Chris Tidwell, sometimes known as Notorious TID on some of the interwebs. And as always, joining me, the wonderful, the always exciting, the ever so charismatic, the man that is sporting the most fabulous banana split shirt I have ever seen in my life. I'm talking about the one and only Steve Swift. Steve, how you doing this week, brother?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you. It's very nice to see you. It's also added to the wonderful shirt that I've got a bit of my food on here.
Well, it's the banana splits. You could have said it was from the 1970s and it just never washed out.
Oh,
Nobody
it might
would have
be.
known the difference.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. It could be a curly whirly. I don't know if you have a curly whirly in your country.
Were you talking about the candy bar?
Yeah.
Don't think I don't know what's up.
Oh.
Absolutely. Steve, do you have any brothers?
I am an only child.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay, so you're lucky. You're lucky. You were spoiled. You had to do the whole thing. I have a brother. I have a younger brother, 5 years younger. And it was always the discussion around, like, am I my brother's keeper? You know, am I responsible for what my brother does in life? Because I was the older brother. So you kind of like, am I the role model? Am I the one that he needs to build himself after, so to speak? I say nay. Nay, I say nay, because that's the job of a father. Now, the reason I say this is because in the world of boxing, we seem to have this situation come up more times than not. If you were to look down, there's a ton of father and son boxing duos, but there is an absolute litany of boxer families. So much so that there's even a pair of sisters on the list, if you will, right? Yeah, did you know that? Let's start off with the girls, the Serranos. Everybody talks about Amanda Serrano. Not a lot of people remember Cindy Serrano, who's only a couple of years older, also lost to Katie Taylor. So Katie's got a thing on the family, right? What if I was to say to you, how about a name everybody knows, a name like, let's see here. Oh, how about this one, for example? Everybody knows John Fury, the father of Tyson Fury, but does everybody know Peter Fury? Does anybody know Huey? Does anybody know Roman? Right? This is an entire family of brothers and cousins and whatnot. So let's start right there. Let's talk about brothers in boxing this week, and we might as well start right now, right off the gate, with the Furies. Go ahead, fellow Brit. Tell us what you know.
Do not make that connection just because I happen to live in the same country. Just, this country may be smaller than yours, but I don't bump into Tyson. Well, I do about twice a week, but I don't bump into him every day. So the real brother thing I want to talk about. Yes, we've got Huey. These Fury pair don't really, if you can say apropos, I can do a bit of fancy wording as well.
Okay.
They don't fight very often, but it's got to be difficult with Tyson and Tommy. That's got to be so difficult because Tommy's not the boxer Tyson is.
No.
It's as simple as that. How do you? We've got the same thing with the Smith family, really, from Liverpool. Mm-hmm. There's 4 brothers there. Mm-hmm. But Callum is by far the more storied. So how do you? And they don't seem to have as much of a problem as with it as maybe he doesn't have a problem with it. Maybe Tommy doesn't and thinks, I think I'd rather be a reality TV star than a multimillionaire boxer. I mean, you can only get your heart beaten up on Love Island. You can't get your face beaten. And he is a good-looking boy.
Yeah.
So you've got to at some point think, I'm never going to do this, am I? I mean, that's got to be a terrible thought to think I'm never going to be able to get this done. And then how you make a decision, don't you? Do I want to step am I following him and holding onto his coattails and saying, what can I get? Give me the crumbs, Tyson. Or do you say, I want to forge my own way and start working in a totally different way, as he has done with reality TV? It's hard.
It's absolutely hard. It's always going to be hard to try to live in the shadow of an older, more successful brother. And we've seen some times where it hasn't worked out to the best advantage. A lot of times, everybody knows who Marvin Hagler is, right? Who the hell knows who Robbie Sims is? It's Marvin Hagler's brother, who is an actual contender, but nobody knows who he is because he's not given the same kind of push. Tommy Hearns had a few brothers who were in boxing as well, right? Probably one of the most well-known ones back then in the day. Let's talk about Michael. Let's talk about Leon. Let's talk about the Spinks, because there is a family. There's a family of fighters right there themselves, that probably some of the best heavyweight boxing you'll ever see. No doubt about it, from Michael Spinks.
Yes, but the thing is, you get with the remembrance of these boxers, because I had to go away and do some research here. You made me go and do some sodding research, and I have notes that I'm referring to.
Okay.
So this is the first time ever. So I think that because I thought, what do I remember? And when I looked at the research, I thought I was right to remember it because that's what everybody else does. So, for Leon and Michael, it's Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And then beaten by Muhammad Ali a few months later. And it's Larry Holmes, isn't it? And then beaten badly by Mike Tyson. That's your remembrance, and you are right. Fantastic heavyweight boxers, but of a smaller size. But that's what people remember. They've not been remembered very well by history.
I think there's also, just a certain thing. Boxing was different. Boxing was a lot different then, right? So the brothers in boxing was a lot different. Everybody kind of had their own path. It wasn't really until of recent time that the brothers were hanging out together. Charlos, Jermel and Jamal, a perfect example. That was kind of the first what is going on here in boxing? Who are these guys? Why are they dressed like Migos? And when are they going to fight?
They enjoyed their company so much that they couldn't bear to be parted and get in the boxing ring. It's a bit silly, and it's also a bit like tag team wrestling. It's like, I'll just switch me out for my brother. You get Jamal.
Right?
Who's who? It's that sort of. It's like the Conquistadors in the late 80s of the WWF.
Yeah.
Who?
It's like I wish it was more like the Corsican twins, to be honest with you. Because it got a little silly, and finally we just had the resurgence, the comeback of one of the Charlo brothers, who just fought in this past week or whatever. Did quite well in order to try to set up a fight with the man who was on the main event, and one Caleb Plant, who I adore, love me some Caleb Plant, no doubt about it. But let's face facts. I think we all saw this fight, and in the round number 5, he took a body shot, and then it all went downhill for there. That's exactly what happened. And he tried to fight in with a guy, Resendez, that you cannot fight inside with, instead of sticking to the game plan. And I'm sorry that Caleb Plant lost, but you lost because you didn't do the right thing, Caleb. Anyways. Am I right?
Yeah. All ends up, mate. All ends up. I'm sorry. I really like Caleb Plant as well. I don't have that kind of man crush that you do on him, but I like him as well, and beaten all ends up. I mean, controlled and beaten beautifully, and I would suggest even before that fifth round, controlled very
Yep.
nicely.
Yep. And Resendez might, if you were to look back on what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, on some of the fighters who might go down as the quote dirtiest fighters in the game, this young kid might be turning into one of those guys, because his ability to fight in close with forearms and elbows, and that head, jabbing that head right into the eye socket constantly and not getting called out for it, very well should have possibly had a point taken away. But that's a different thing, and it's all part of the game. Resendez did a fantastic job in that fight.
Agree. And and really didn't come from nowhere, but you take the chances you get, don't you?
Yeah.
So, we might talk about it later on. Justice Huoney did the same thing at the weekend against Fabio Wardley. Same thing entirely.
Well, heavyweights are a different story altogether, because, anything can happen for 10 rounds and then all of a sudden, kapow, which is exactly what we saw in that situation.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I just wanted to shout through the TV, don't take this round off, Justice. Don't. Oh,
yep.
Right.
Too late. And that's what happened. Now, let's talk about this past weekend, because this past weekend also kind of ties into this whole theme of brothers and how absolutely ridiculous of a shit show this was for some people. What if I were to say to you, Steve, 1 minute, you are the WBC champion. You are headlining in your hometown this weekend. All you got to do is show up and make weight. The contender that they've picked for you isn't somebody who's going to give you any kind of problems. So this is a homecoming show out for you. And you know what? We're going to put one of your other brothers, because there's 3 of you, we're going to put one of your other brothers on the undercard as well. All you got to do is show up and make weight. As a champion in your very first title defense, and you couldn't do that. And so what do? I'm talking about Keyshawn Davis. Let's go down this line here. Didn't make weight, misses weight by like 4 point something pounds, almost 5 pounds, misses weight at 135 pounds. That's a lot of weight. His excuse was, oh, I grew out of the weight. Yeah, okay, cool, whatever. And I get that. Rather than, do the thing, it doesn't want. Floyd Mayweather did it all the time. You want me to pay 5% of what? Screw it. Take my belt. I'm just going to come back and fight somebody and beat him for it all the time. It's the most ridiculous thing in boxing. Keyshawn Davis, none of these champions even understand it anymore. So they're like, screw it. Take my belt away from me. That's what he did in his hometown. To make matters worse, he stayed there, watched his brother fight. His brother loses. So him and his other brother go to the locker room of the man that beat his brother and get into his face and have an altercation that turns physical at some point with somebody because they beat his brother. What is going on with DB3 and the Davises? Come on.
Well, I mean, the first thing, let's talk about the lack of weight or the over the scales weight situation. I just want to, I'll take your view on this. I just want to know if you know, I mean, he said, as you say, I've grown out of this weight class, and and he's intimated that he won't return to that weight class.
Sure.
But if you know in your team that you are probably going to, it's not 0.25 of a pound, is it? It's over 4 pounds. Yeah. So you will have known quite a long time ago, I suspect, that you're not going to make it. Not in a month of sodding Sundays. You could stop time and you'd still not make it. So at some point, you probably got to say to Top Rank, it was Top Rank show, wasn't it?
Yep.
Really, we can't do this. And Top Rank we'll probably have to give refunds. That's not good to start with. And then there's a simmering discontent, isn't there? And the thing about the brothers, particularly if there's three. I know that one of them wasn't involved, but particularly if there's three, there's a sense of being a gang. You know, I
Well,
mean,
the one
the
that wasn't
Furies have this
involved,
as well.
the one that wasn't involved was the one that was in the fight. And he's the one that had to apologize for the actions of his brothers. Here's the thing as well. There's nothing, absolutely nothing the commissions can do about this. Because this happened. I talked to my friend who's part of a boxing commission. Because of it happening after the fight has taken place in the dressing room, that's not the problem of the commissioner. That's the problem of the security of the venue. And that's a shame, because if you think for 1 second that these guys don't know that and know that there would be no repercussions from Bob Arum, who's already screwed, because not only did Keyshawn Davis miss weight and there should have been some kind of, negotiation for purse being distributed over to Dos Santos, his camp and everything like that, they finally just said, you know what? Screw it. No fight. So now you've gotten rid of the main event. You were the main event. You destroyed the card from the top by not making weight. In the presser prior, the guy in the co-main event, right? You're sitting next to Abdullah Mason, who's 2 weight classes now lower than you, and you're trying to pick a fight, get him to say he wants to fight you. You're weight bullying. It looks ridiculous. Keyshawn Davis and his brothers have now put this black eye onto boxing. Quite frankly, the fact that the brother who was in the fight was the one that had to apologize and the other two haven't said anything is a glaring reminder that you all are not about boxing. You're about fighting. And there's a difference, because you can't have fighting in boxing.
Absolutely, and you need to understand the business of boxing.
Yeah.
And you need to understand how that works and how your brand works, and not allow that simmering enmity of I didn't get to fight and he lost, that to boil over. Now with the Furies, you've got the dad doing that. So
Sure.
okay, oh dad. So that's okay. Not
Sure.
okay, but two brothers, and I'm going to start. I'm going to give you another pair of brothers now. Two brothers who did understand the business of boxing are the Klitschko twins. They
Yes.
understood the business of boxing, and their promoter understood the business of boxing with them beautifully. Now, never was I more bored of heavyweight boxing and with heavyweight boxing than when they were there, but they knew what they were doing, and they dominated for years.
Yes. So much so that, in my opinion, it drove me away from heavyweight boxing. Because typically for the longest time, as well as I do, you're of that same era of growing up, that heavyweights, that was the marquee, that was the moneymaker. As much as we enjoyed watching the smaller guys fight, right? It was, no, I want to see dudes get knocked out. I want to see sweat flying into the 5th row. I want to see cuts and blood and just gigantic gladiator beasts, man on man, meat slapping. Like, I wanted to see the heavyweights. And then it just got to the point where they were fighting no contenders. And they just controlled the heavyweight division in such a way that boxing knew there was no contender. So let's just float these guys through, kind of like when Kevin Nash was a heavyweight champion. Fantastic for him, right? Absolutely. But not a lot of people were not as many people were watching as when Hulk Hogan was champion.
Can I just do? Ooh. That sounded like tugboat. That's not ideal.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was that?
The thing about the Klitschkos, do you think that because they were not American and because they were not British, and consequently so they were not that kind of, when London or Las Vegas, do you think they needed to be even better than they could be to make it seem as though you're in the mainstream, son, because they seem so far away from us.
Yes, because they were champions at the same time that we had imaginary things on TV like Ivan Drago. I'm not even playing. We had things in professional wrestling like America versus, the Iran. And nobody knew the difference back then between a Ukrainian and a Russian. I'm sorry, but that's the facts. And everybody just assumed the Klitschkos were these Russians. And they're not. They're Ukrainian. The farthest from being Russian, actually, if you paid attention to the recent history, you know. But the fact remains that these were European bloc fighters. You're right. You're absolutely right. Because they weren't British, because they weren't Mexican, because they weren't American, nobody cared. Nobody cared, right?
Yeah. And their wrestling, their boxing was so shite as well.
It wasn't
Let's
good.
not forget that.
Now, let's talk about it. Speaking of Mexicans, it seems like that country probably, in my opinion, I'd have to do the exact numbers, but I'm pretty safe in guessing that Mexico has probably produced the most families of boxers. And probably the most famous ones out of all of them, I'll say it, are going to end up being Rafael and Juan Manuel Marquez. In my opinion, anyways. I'm sure that you could say that there's, a lot of other ones from Mexico that probably deserve just as much, if not more, recognition. There's the Margaritos. There's the I don't know. There's somebody whose son is fighting Jake Paul coming up here. The Chavez, his whole family. There's the Arces, the Alvarez. There's a ton of families out of Mexico, but Juan Manuel Marquez and his brother Rafael Marquez, in my opinion, probably two of the best ones. Rafael, 41-9 record. Juan Manuel, everybody remembers, 56-7. Let's talk about Rafael Marquez was such a stud that he ended up having to fight Israel Vasquez 4 times. 3 of those times were in a row, Steve. I remember these. It was that whole early 2000s early 2000s stuff, and there's nothing else going on. But these wars were great. And everybody knows about the wars between Pacquiao and Marquez. Everybody knows about, the Timothy Bradley fight. Everybody, you look down Floyd Mayweather fight, even the other Pacquiao fights. Marquez is the dude. So in my opinion, they go down as the best brother team in boxing. What you got?
Yeah, well, I appreciate what you're saying, because if we're talking about the boxing and the business of boxing, then there's no business of boxing there. It's all blood and guts, boxing of boxing. It's boxing for the love of boxing and boxing for being thumped in the face. I just want to get some glove in the face today, and I'm just going to go and do that over and over again. There's no kind of, and this is what you often get with Mexican boxers. There's no, and this is one of the reasons why they're loved so much by me, and I'm sure you as well. There's no kind of, well, I'm sidestepping that dude to fight that dude. No, I'll fight anybody. Bring somebody in. Talk bigger, smaller. I'll fight anybody. And that's one of the reasons why both of them so beautifully remembered. And you're quite right. Fantastic results. And so entertaining, because there's no business. It's just all blood, guts, and thunder.
Yeah. It seems like every country has a couple of brothers that have done it, though. And at least done it to a level, a very high level. I mean, even Canada has had a couple of brother teams that have even done this. Go ahead. You're going to have it out there. You're going to say, well, I don't know who that could possibly be. Right? who the hell well, let's think about who Canada, first of all, has ever had for fighters. Let's talk about Arturo Gatti. Let's talk about his brother Joe. Outstanding, but nobody thinks because of the last name that they're Canadians, right? Most importantly, the guys that you're going to get, you're going to end up getting my boys from right around here, Sid and his brother Fitz, the Vanderpools. Sid and Fitz Vanderpool, absolutely unreal studs in the world of boxing for Canada, and a very good brother combination. But I go back to the Gottis because everybody remembers Arturo Gatti.
You think they're Argentinian? Well, I do. You know, you're right.
Yeah.
You know, it's extraordinary, and that's part of the business of boxing as well. In that, you know, their style as well. Both of their styles are not. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tidster.
Mm-hmm.
Their styles are not what you would expect from Canadian gentlemen.
No, and that's the thing, because you don't think, you know, I've had these conversations about fighters and Canadian fighters in general with some people around here, because you talk about like every country, you can tell their style. You know, for the most part, you can tell like where a very Mexican style of fighting, a very British style of fighting, a very American style of fighting, and even a Canadian style of fighting, which is very similar to an American style of fighting. They just say sorry in between punches, it seems like, and they don't have the same kind of aggressive nature. Right. I just don't think that it's bred into them, first of all, except for Quebecers. But that's a different story, and they want to separate anyways. But listen, for the most part, they just don't have that same kind of war inside of them, I don't think. And that's not a knock. You know what I mean? There's not a whole heck of a lot of world beast beaters that come out of Switzerland either. There's just certain countries that are known for their niceties, known for being the peacekeepers, as you will. Canada is one of them. It ain't England, I'll tell you that much. You guys are always starting fucking wars.
We're scuffling on the streets every night. You know that it's happening right now. We're scuffling on the streets, right? I'm going to go and do that in a bit. So, you know, well, actually it's raining, so I'll probably do it tomorrow. But because I've got a cold, I don't really want to get, you know. Oh.
Nothing puts a damper on a good riot like a rainstorm, huh?
And yeah, and that's what I've got at the moment. And that's what happens in Britain. It's, oh, are you sure? Let's have another cup of tea and a crumpet, and then everything seems better. You don't get many boxers from Switzerland. No,
you don't. You don't.
They call him Cuckoo Clock. He's right on time.
I mean, you could probably save money because he could ref his own fight. You know,
yeah, it's interesting that you're quite right that different countries, we expect different styles. So yes, those Gattis are absolutely, again, blood, guts and thunder, and that's not what you get with Canada, and I love Canada for it. But yeah,
it's great. It's great. Now, what if I were to say to you the last name Norris?
Yeah. I'm very glad because I made some notes on this.
Please,
I made some notes on this. Yeah, completely forgotten. I believe Terry Orlin.
Orlin completely forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. Terry Norris, I suppose. Yeah, because of the time and people he fought, but they both had success.
Yes.
Yeah, they both had success. It's just that they, you know, I mean, I would say that Terry Norris is not. He's not on anybody's lips, really, is he? Unless you put famous boxing brothers into a search engine of your choice, and that one pops up, which he did earlier, and I went, Terry Norris. But Orlin, I remembered Orlin as well, but only when I was prompted. Extraordinary, but they both had success.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at higher weights.
One of those has success over a dude who probably will go down as one of the greatest of all time. He's a Sugar. He's a Sugar Ray, but he's not a Robinson. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he's a Leonard.
Yeah. Yeah, but enormous situation, and in a way expunged from history.
Yeah.
You know, it's a shame because they had real success.
Yeah.
But this is the same as the Spinks, isn't it? This is the Spinks thing, which is okay. Larry Holmes, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, done. Well, it's not that. There's an awful lot more. And if you have a look at those fights on YouTube, you'll see the
Yeah.
quality. But people don't want to do that. It's a headline world, and that's the headline. And the same with the Norrises. It's a shame because they, as I say, again, they had that success, but people don't want to remember.
No. Oh God, no. Oh God, no. we're here. We're here for the ridiculous, you know. And the thing that another thing that we remember with Spinks brothers is there was a time when one of them should not have been in the ring.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everybody remembers the infamous breakdown that you've only seen a couple of times inside of the ring. You know, and that's a different discussion altogether, because how is it that you get to that point of the day and of the night, and nobody from medical, nobody from your team, nobody from, you know, any other thing has noticed any of this? And I
Yeah.
firmly also said that sometimes boxers need to have some kind of like psych evaluations along with medical evaluations.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's a, I'm not saying this is the case in either of the boxers we're talking about here. One of whom is making a comeback at the moment, which will be very interesting, Mr. McCall. But I'm not making any comments about the teams, but there is a kind of pressure, isn't there, to get that fighter delivered to the ring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who's going to go and tell the promoter, he's just blubbering back here? You know, he's walking around and hitting himself with a loofah in the bathroom. I can't really take him out here. You know, you deliver him to the ring. You know, and if it takes tough love, you do it. And then we see what happens, don't we? There are loads of boxers who don't want to be there. And we know that. You know, I believe a certain Mr. Haney at the moment doesn't want to be there. But you deliver him to the ring because that's at stake.
But then which would you rather have? Which would you rather be on the back end of a situation? Would it rather have it where it's where you have a fighter in the back where you're like, oh, I can't put this guy out there like this. Or, and that's because you put him at the top of the bill. Or somebody that you put at the top of the bill and then treats the business end of it the way that Keyshawn Davis did this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean,
which is worse?
At least those people who have the breakdown get in there and have a go. You know, and it's sadder. And you know, I'm madder at Keyshawn Davis, and it's sadder for Corey Spinks and for Oliver McCall. You know, but to miss egregiously in that way, I know, fancy Dan, and that sounds like a boxer, fancy Dan, and I think that's really egregious, and I think it shows a real lack of care, of boxing, and an understanding of the business of boxing, but not in a nice way.
No. Listen, who else you got? Who else you got from brothers before we wrap this whole thing up on us, Steve?
I don't have that many. We've got Adam Azim and his brother Hassan, but Hassan's you know, I mean, we've got that, but everyone's talking about Adam.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not Hassan.
Right.
So
this is what we talked about. This is what we talked about brothers not being able to live up to the expectation of their other brother.
Yeah.
And is that a deterrent not only on their professional life, but also on their personal life? because there's got to be some kind of tension. I can only imagine there's got to be some kind of tension at Christmas time, when you're like, oh, why didn't you get me the nice gift that your brother got me? Oh, how come you're not as good a boxer as your brother? Oh, why is your wife looking at your brother this way? There's all kinds of stuff that can lead to my dogs are tied up by the pool. My physical address is, and don't blame this on Kevin Sullivan. There's lots of stuff that leads up to that, right?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And you said it right. Like the people, the nobody talks about Hassan. Nobody does, right? When you talk about British fighters, right? You talk about families. Who was it? Oh, what was that? I'm thinking. Who the hell was I just thinking about? Oh my God, I'm drawing a complete blank right now. In Britain, you had the Hattons, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Another absolutely outstanding one fighter.
Yes.
This is what I'm saying. Who was it?
Didn't you though want to talk about the Garcia?
Well, there's Robert and Mikey Garcia.
Yeah.
Who Robert has become probably one of the greatest trainers of all time now. Like people are looking to get Robert Garcia as their trainer, and Mikey Garcia, absolutely stellar things. But I think even Mikey Garcia's career fell a little bit short comparatively to Robert, right?
Yes, but isn't this smart? And people aren't smart, with the kind of, as you say, look, why have you got a belt and I don't have a belt? I'm as good as you are.
Mm-hmm.
So to segue away and say, well, you know what? I'm going to stay in the game. I'll do something else. There can be no, you can't have any kind of comparison now because I do something different. So it's in your game, but I do something different. And people will now remember me for that. So no one can say, well, better, better than Mikey, So it's really smart to do that. And whether or not he had the thought of that, it's a nice thing as well to do for your brother.
I think what it was, like as good as Robert was, Mikey also still kind of fell short up to expectation because everybody, like, he's going through people. And then, as well as I do, then he met up with Errol Spence, and Errol Spence Jr. schooled him in a way that made him realize that there's levels to this. And then we saw what happened with Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford. So boxing math never makes sense. And it always, baffles me. Right.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
But as far as a brother duo who has seen the success that they've seen, you cannot deny Robert and Mikey Garcia on that list for sure. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, Robert Garcia, let's talk about, talk about who all the guys are that he actually trains.
Yes.
Nowadays, it's ridiculous. Right? You don't usually see that because we had this conversation before, how it's usually like father and son duo. You don't see there's not a lot of Freddie Roaches out there in the world. There's not a lot of just a coach that people go to get coached by. Robert Garcia became that dude. Not the most prolific fighter, but one of the best coaches and one of the best minds for the business of boxing. Business of boxing.
Absolutely. But with brothers, what often happens is because it's a gang situation,
mm-hmm.
the brawling of boxing takes over another beat. So, because they can't keep that gang feeling away. And that's such a shame. When it affects the business of boxing, it affects the branding of the boxing. And it's, as we've seen this weekend, when you can't keep that, and being a gang is more important than anything else, then that's a really really sad situation.
And then you just become labeled as the babies of boxing because that's all you are. You're a
Yeah.
god dang baby. You didn't like that your brother in boxing got beat by a better boxer. So you buffoons befuddled the backstage area by breaking down and beating the better boxer who beat your brother.
Brilliant.
You boobs.
That is the highlight of the week for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the bees of boxing, if you will. Listen, Steve, it's always been a pleasure. It's always fun. I'm sorry that we missed last week. You were under the weather. I was on the road. And, I'm glad that we got this one done. It's good. It's good to be back. I've got the summer off, so we have some good fights coming up that I'm looking forward to so much that we're going to get a chance to talk about starting this weekend. Starting this weekend.
Go on, give it to me.
Well, I think it's your boy coming up too, isn't it? Manny Pacquiao fight is coming up very soon here, isn't it?
The thing is, oh, by the way, I know we missed last week, but I'm very glad you got that business with the bail bondsman sorted out. This fight is fine now. I'm fine with it because Mauricio Sulaiman has told us that it was a mistake. That Manny Pacquiao was ranked number 5. So that's no problem. He's going to get beaten from pillar to post, and I feel very worried about him.
Well, listen, this weekend coming up, George Kambosos Jr. is back, but he is fighting Richardson Hitchens, and that is going to be one hell of a fight. I'm looking forward to that. Isaac Cruz is back. Nonito Donaire is fighting coming up. Brian Norman Jr. has a fight coming up later this month. Who else have we got? Coming up? One of the Walshes that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Is actually fighting coming up, right? Like some of the fights that we've got coming up so far this summer. Oh, it's going to be a fun time to talk.
Well, let me give you, apart from Usyk and Dubois, which actually will be tasty. It will be because I can't think that Dubois will win, but he might. But the one I'm really looking forward to at the moment, apart from Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, is Edgar Berlanga versus Hamza Shiraz.
That's going to be
time to step up, Hamza. Put your big boy pants on, and let's see if you really have what it takes to be in the spotlight. That is something. It's that moment where you think it's all or nothing now. They're the moments I really like when you think he's either gonna blossom or he's withering, and that's it.
Well, and look at the undercard of that. The undercard of that fight, you've got Shakur Stevenson, who everybody's been talking crap about. Is this going to be his way? He's got this very defensive style about him, but he's going up against William Zepeda, who you try to use that style and it might come out to haunt you because that is a go forward kind of guy. So this is going to be Shakur Stevenson's biggest challenge as well this year. I mean, some of these fights that are coming up as well, like you think about it, what is the date today? The 9th. We are little over a month away from Usyk Dubois. We're less than a month away from Jake Paul being on our TVs again. This is the outstanding part about the summer is that thankfully we can change the channel immediately after. But
now, listen,
so many good fights.
Jake Paul might get found out here if his opponent, if Junior turns up. I think Jake Paul could get found out, and I'm just looking for that to happen because he ain't the boxer he thinks he is.
Well, let me give you this one as we go out, and I'm going to get your prediction on this from the Brit side of the pond, as it were. A good Brit versus Brit fight coming up from Manchester Arena, July 5th, a Saturday evening. One Mr. Jack Catterall against another Eubank. Another Eubank. Who do you think takes this one?
I can't think that Jack Catterall will. I mean, far more experience, far more patience, far more. I'm not going to say skill, but the experience and patience and the ability to go in that kind of cauldron will come through for him. I can't imagine that he'll
But here's
lose that.
but here's the thing. I mean, it's a 31 Jack Catterall against a 32-year-old Harlem Eubank.
And I know, and I don't. I'm not. I mean, I just. It's the Eubank dynasty, isn't it? You know, it's brothers, so it's the Eubank dynasty. And the thing is that we're now talking about Ben and Eubank again, and Ben
Mhm,
Shalom, who
mhm.
we talked a few weeks ago as being prescient, and now he's lost his Sky Sports deal. So that's not going to do. So it's going to be interesting for him over the next few weeks. So, because where can he go? BT Sports has got Warren. Warren's sewn up Matchroom with DAZN with Matchroom. So interesting. However,
I
Shalom's
know where he
calling
goes.
for that fight again, and we need to do something about weight. But they've had to fight to step out of the shadows of their dad. So they should have another fight because now they're legitimately fighters.
Yes, 100% agree. 100% agree. And on the way out, let me just put this in your ear. What if Boxer and what if Ben Shalom does a deal with UFC and puts their fights on Fight Pass? Puts their fights on Fight Pass, ends up getting into bed there. That brings them closer to doing a deal with TKO Boxing. All these young guys, instead of dealing with the old Bob Arams and all of the old guard, this is what we're doing. And this is maybe why everybody's been kind of quiet on that TKO boxing front for the last little bit.
You
Maybe that
all
deal needed to die.
You always give me options. You're quite right that would work because he, as you say, I've got the massive stars and they demand loads of cash. So that would be really interesting. And, I hope it would, something like that happens because Ben Shalom is a force for good in boxing promotion, I believe.
Absolutely agree with you. Ladies and gentlemen, you can always check out Steve's stuff over at World Weary Guy 1. It's always a blast. It's always a blast. Who are we talking about this week over there as far as music goes, Steve?
There's a band who are called Airborne. You might have heard of them. They're an Australian band. They are, I mean, a lot of people say they're AC/DC copyists, and they are. But AC/DC aren't doing this anymore. They went away for a while. Having seen them live many times and talked to them many times, I think this might crash and burn at some point, and it seems to have done for a while. People wrote them off. They are back with a track which is called Gutsy. And you see, I love a bit of early AC/DC, and they aren't doing it at the moment. So Airborne will.
All right. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, Steve, as soon as you get a band that is starting to do things like Fastway, then you let me know because Fastway ain't doing it no more either. Listen, if you want to check it out, please hit that like, hit that subscribe, share this with all of your friends. I'm Chris. He's Steve. This is the Bees of Boxing. And one thing you got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what happens, tuck that chin.